The surgical blade trembled in her hand, not from the cold, though ice crystals hung in the air like frozen breath, not from the 30-degree tilt of the deck beneath her feet, though the Arctic crown groaned with each shift of the glacier pressing against its hull. The blade trembled because Vivian Blackwood's hands remembered what it meant to fail. Blood pooled on the makeshift operating table. A door ripped from its hinges. A man dying beneath flickering emergency lights. And standing 3 feet away, a pistol aimed at her temple, waiting to see if she would save him or let him bleed out on the frozen deck. 52 hours earlier, she had sworn she would never hold a scalpel again. The Seattle harbor stretched gray and endless as Vivian stood at the passenger terminal, watching gulls circle the departure gates. Her duffel bag sat at her feet. Inside 3 changes of clothes, a worn paperback, and a bottle of sleeping pills, she told herself she didn't need, but carried anyway. "You're early," she turned. Brennan Blackwood stood behind her, his engineer's jacket zipped against the April wind, silver hair cropped military short, despite 20 years in the private sector. At 65, her father still carried himself like the offshore rig supervisor he'd been for 4 decades. Straight spine, level gaze, hands that had welded steel in North Sea storms and never shook, unlike hers. "Didn't sleep," Vivian said. Brennan studied her face, the circles under her eyes, the way she held her coffee cup with both hands to keep it steady. He didn't ask why she hadn't slept. He knew better. "The ship's beautiful," he said instead. "State of the art, 380 passengers. You'll like the observation deck." "I'm sure." "Viv," she met his eyes. "You don't have to come," Brennan said quietly. "I know you said yes because I asked, but if you need more time, I need less time in saddle." The truth hung between them. Less time in her apartment, where she woke at 3 a.m. seeing Corporal Ethan Walsh's face. Less time walking past Virginia Mason Hospital, where she used to scrub in 6 days a week. Less time pretending the Coast Guard rescue work filled the space that surgery had left behind. Brennan nodded slowly. "Alaska's good for forgetting. That's what I'm counting on." The Arctic crown rose before them like a steel cathedral. 12 decks, 20,000 tons, glass observation lounges that caught the morning sun and threw it back in sheets of gold. Vivian had seen the brochures her father left on her kitchen counter. Luxury accommodations, gourmet dining, glacier tours, and wildlife photography. A floating prison of forced relaxation. They boarded through the main terminal. Families with excited children, elderly couples holding hands, tour groups clustering around guides with bright flags. Vivian felt their happiness like pressure against her skin. All these people seeking beauty and wonder while she just wanted 7 days of numbness. The cabin was on deck 7. 2 beds, a porthole window, neutral colors designed to soothe. Brennan set his bag on the left bed without discussion. He'd always taken the position nearest the door. Old habit from oil rigs where emergency evacuation drills were gospel. "I'm going to check out the engine room," he said, "see if they'll let a retired grease monkey peek at their systems." "Dad," he paused at the door. "Thank you," Vivian said, "for not giving up on me." Brennan's expression softened. "You're my daughter. I don't know how to do that." He left her alone with the silence and the steady thrum of the ship's engines preparing to depart. Vivian sat on her bed and stared at her hands. Surgeon's hands, steady under pressure, precise, reliable, except when they killed people. She closed her eyes, felt the phantom weight of the scalpel, the spray of arterial blood that meant she'd cut wrong, the flatline scream of monitors, the chaplain's hand on her shoulder whispering words about courage and sacrifice while Corporal Ethan Walsh grew cold under surgical drapes. Her phone buzzed. Text from Commander Garrett Winters. "Heard you're taking leave." "Good, you've earned it." She almost laughed. Earned it. Like hiding from your past was some kind of achievement medal. The ship's horn sounded. Deep, resonant, final. The Arctic crown pulled away from Seattle carrying 380 souls toward glaciers and whales in the kind of pristine wilderness that made people feel small in comforting ways. Vivian felt small in different ways entirely. The observation deck on Deck 12 offered 360-degree views through floor-to-ceiling windows. Heated floors, plush seating, a bar serving craft cocktails at prices that made Vivian's Coast Guard salary seem quaint. She stood near the forward windows, watching the Olympic mountains fade into mist. "Dr. Blackwood," the voice came from behind her, calm, authoritative, familiar in a way that made her shoulders tense before she even turned around. Commander Garrett Winters stood 6 feet away, hands in the pockets of a civilian jacket that looked wrong on him, like seeing a wolf in a cardigan. At 58, he still had the bearing of his 30 years in the Navy. deep-set eyes that missed nothing, gray beard trimmed with military precision, the kind of presence that made junior officers stand straighter without realizing they were doing it. Commander Vivian said carefully, "I didn't know you'd be on this cruise." Garrett, "We're both civilians this week." He moved to stand beside her at the window. "My wife's idea. 30th anniversary. She wanted glaciers. I wanted bourbon and silence. We compromised." Despite everything, Vivian felt her mouth twitch. "Where is she?" "Spa. Something involving hot stones and kelp. I'm under strict orders to relax until dinner." They stood in companionable quiet. Below them, the Puget Sound stretched dark and cold. Vivian knew Winters wasn't here by accident. He'd served 20 years as a naval surgeon before transitioning to Coast Guard command. He'd reviewed her file when she transferred to rescue operations 8 months ago. He knew exactly what she was running from. "How's the work?" he asked. "It's work." "That's not an answer." "It's all I've got." Winters studied the horizon. "I read your evaluations. Top marks in water rescue, navigation, emergency protocols. Your team leader says you're the first person in the helicopter when the call comes. I do my job. You do everyone else's job too. Double shifts. Volunteer for the worst weather, like you're trying to pay off a debt." Vivian's jaw tightened. "With respect, Sir Garrett. With respect, my psychological evaluations are none of your concern on a civilian cruise ship." He turned to face her fully. "You're right, they're not. But I've been where you are, Vivian. I know what it looks like when someone stops being a doctor because they're afraid of making the wrong call again. I made the wrong call, period. No again about it. Corporal Walsh had a 68% chance of survival with conservative treatment. You chose the aggressive approach because it gave him 82%. The differential embolism was a 1 in 5,000 complication. The board cleared you. I left before the hearing finished, which doesn't change the verdict. You did everything right. The patient died anyway. That's medicine, not malpractice." Vivian felt something hot and sharp in her chest. "You read the full file." "I read everything." "Then you know I killed him. I know you tried to save him and failed. There's a difference. Not to his mother." Winters was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried weight. "In 1997, I was operating on a Marine with shrapnel in his spine. Routine extraction. I'd done it 50 times, but my hand slipped. Quarter millimeter. He's been paralyzed from the waist down for 28 years. Vivian looked at him sharply. "His name is Marcus Reeves. He sends me a Christmas card every year with pictures of his kids. 3 of them. All adopted because he can't have biological children. He coaches wheelchair basketball. Last year his team won state." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I almost quit too. Convinced myself that if I couldn't be perfect, I shouldn't be a surgeon at all. Took my wife 3 months to talk me down. You know what she said?" Vivian waited. "She said perfect surgeons don't exist. Only surgeons who keep trying after they fail." The words settled between them like stones. Vivian wanted to believe them, wanted to feel absolution. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Walsh's face. 24 years old, corporal in the Marines, engaged to his high school sweetheart, dead on her table because she chose 82% instead of 68. "I should go find my father," she said. Winters nodded, didn't push. "I'm in cabin 512 if you need anything." And Vivian, he waited until she met his eyes. "Take this week. Really take it. The ocean has a way of putting things in perspective." She managed a small nod before walking away. Behind her through the windows, the mountains continued their slow fade into nothing. Dr. Catherine Sullivan ran the Arctic Crown's medical bay with the efficiency of someone who'd spent 40 years in emergency medicine. At 63, she should have been retired. Instead, she worked 6-month contracts on cruise ships because she liked the work and loved the ocean and had no patience for golf or grandchildren. Vivian met her on the second day out. A crew member had sliced his hand in the galley. Deep cut, needed stitches. The ship's protocol required all medical personnel to check in with the primary physician within 24 hours of departure. Vivian had hoped to avoid it. The medical bay occupied a corner of Deck 3, small but well-equipped. Exam tables, surgical supplies, a pharmacy locked behind reinforced glass. Sullivan stood at a counter organizing medication when Vivian knocked. "Dr. Blackwood." Sullivan's voice carried the warmth of Southern roots. "Georgia, maybe, or Alabama." "Right on time. I was beginning to think you'd skip the meet and greet." "I considered it." Sullivan's eyes crinkled. She was shorter than Vivian by half a foot, with steel gray hair pulled back in a practical bun and hands that showed the wear of decades in medicine. Capable hands. Steady. Everything Vivian's used to be. Coffee, Sullivan gestured to a pot on the counter. I'm fine. Suit yourself. Have a seat anyway. This won't take long. Vivian sat. Sullivan pulled up a tablet and scrolled through what was presumably Vivian's file. Her expression remained neutral, but Vivian knew what she was reading. Navy medical officer, 5 years active duty, surgical residency at Johns Hopkins, transfer to Coast Guard rescue operations, abrupt career change. No explanation in the official record. You're overqualified for rescue work, Sullivan said finally. I like the water. Most surgeons I know prefer operating rooms. Most surgeons you know probably still practice surgery. Sullivan set down the tablet. Fair enough. I'm not here to psychoanalyze you, Dr. Blackwood. Protocol requires me to brief all medical personnel on ship emergency procedures. You're listed as a civilian passenger, but your background means I can deputize you if we have a mass casualty event. I'd prefer you didn't. Noted. But if we hit an iceberg and I've got 200 injured passengers, I'm not going to respect your preference. Clear. Vivian met her gaze. Clear. Good. Sullivan pulled out a binder. Ship has 4 AEDs, 6 trauma kits, 2 operating suites for emergencies. In the event of, the briefing took 20 minutes. Vivian absorbed the information automatically. Deck layouts, supply locations, evacuation protocols. Her mind cataloged it all despite her best efforts to remain detached. Old habits, old training. The part of her brain that had spent 8 years learning how to save lives didn't shut off just because she wanted it to. When Sullivan finished, she closed the binder and studied Vivian with an expression that was too knowing. I won't ask what happened, she said quietly, but I will say this. The ocean doesn't care about our past mistakes. Out here, all that matters is what you do when the moment comes. Vivian stood. Let's hope the moment doesn't come. She left before Sullivan could respond. The earthquake hit on the 3rd day. Vivian was in the observation lounge with her father watching the inside passage slide by in shades of green and gray. Brennan had spent the morning pointing out geological formations with the enthusiasm of someone who'd spent 40 years studying how the earth moved and broke and reformed itself. See that striping? He gestured at a cliff face. That's sedimentary layering. Each band represents thousands of years, like reading a history book written in stone. Vivian sipped her coffee. You should have been a geologist. Considered it. Oil paid better. Everything pays better than geology. Brennan smiled, started to respond. Then the world lurched sideways. The ship pitched hard to starboard. Coffee cups flew. Passengers stumbled. Vivian's training kicked in before conscious thought. She grabbed the table, braced herself, kept her father from falling as the deck tilted 30 degrees and held. The sound came next, not from the ship, from the ocean itself, a deep, grinding roar that seemed to come from the Earth's core. The water outside the windows turned violent, waves rising, churning, throwing spray against the glass with enough force to crack it. 7.4 magnitude. Vivian knew it instantly. She'd studied earthquake protocols, knew the difference between minor tremors and major events. This was major. This was catastrophic. And they were in a ship surrounded by glaciers that were now calving like artillery fire. The shaking lasted 90 seconds. When it stopped, the ship sat at a 15-degree list tilted by ice that had broken from the surrounding cliffs and pinned the hull like a vice. Emergency lights flickered on, alarms screamed, and somewhere below, people were screaming too. Brennan grabbed her arm. Oh, you okay? Fine. I'm good. We need to. The PA system crackled to life. Captain's voice, calm but urgent. All passengers remain in place. Repeat, remain in place. Medical emergency teams to Deck 5. All medical personnel report to Dr. Sullivan immediately. Vivian's stomach dropped. Brennan looked at her. Viv, no. People are hurt. Dr. Sullivan can handle it. Can she handle 40 casualties? 50. We don't know how bad. I said no. The word came out sharper than she intended. Brennan's expression hardened. Not anger, disappointment, which was worse. I'm going to see if I can help with the engine systems, he said quietly. They'll need everyone with technical knowledge. He left her standing in the observation lounge while other passengers rushed toward muster stations. Vivian stood, frozen hands gripping the table, watching ice press against the hull like the walls were closing in. She could hear Walsh's heart monitor flatlining, could smell the antiseptic and blood, could feel the exact moment when she realized her aggressive approach had killed him instead of saving him. Her phone buzzed. Text from Sullivan. Need you in medical. Now. Vivian stared at the message, deleted it, turned her phone off. Then she walked to her cabin and locked the door. The pounding started 20 minutes later. Vivian sat on her bed knees pulled to her chest while someone hammered on the cabin door hard enough to rattle the frame. She knew it was Sullivan, knew what the doctor wanted, knew exactly how many people were probably bleeding out 3 decks below, while she hid like a coward. Dr. Blackwood, Sullivan's voice carried through the door. I know you're in there. I need you. Vivian didn't respond. I've got 43 injured, 17 critical, head traumas, compound fractures, internal bleeding. I'm 63 years old with arthritis in both hands and I can't do this alone. Silence. Please. The word broke something in Vivian's chest, but not enough. She closed her eyes and waited for Sullivan to leave. After 5 minutes, the pounding stopped. Footsteps retreated down the corridor. Vivian was alone again with her guilt and her cowardice and the steady sound of alarms that meant people were dying. She lasted another 10 minutes before her father's voice came through the door. Vivian Eleanor Blackwood. Full name. He only used it when she crossed a line she couldn't uncross. I know you're scared, Brennan said. His voice was level, controlled, the same tone he used when explaining why she couldn't quit piano lessons at age 12. I know what happened in Djibouti hurt you, but right now there are people bleeding. Doctor, Sullivan is 70 years old. 63, Vivian whispered. And she can't save them all alone. You took an oath. You swore to do no harm. Walking away when people need you, that's harm, Viv. That's the worst kind. I killed someone. So you're going to let more people die to balance the scales. The logic cut through her paralysis like a scalpel. Vivian stood, walked to the door, pressed her forehead against the cool metal. I can't do this, she said. Yes, you can. My hands shake. Then use mine. Open the door, Vivian. She reached for the handle, hesitated, thought about Walsh, thought about the oath she'd taken 8 years ago, thought about all the reasons she'd left medicine and all the reasons that suddenly seemed like excuses. The ship lurched again. Not an earthquake this time. Something worse. Gunfire. 3 shots. Rapid succession, somewhere above them, followed by screaming that wasn't from pain but from terror. Vivian yanked open the door. Brennan stood in the corridor, face grim. Behind him, passengers ran toward their cabins, eyes wide with panic. What's happening? Vivian demanded. I don't know, but we need to. The PA system crackled, but it wasn't the captain's voice this time. It was someone else. Male. Cold. Utterly calm. Attention passengers and crew of the Arctic Crown. My name is Callahan Reeves. This ship is now under the control of Frostblade. If you cooperate, no one else needs to die. If you resist, we will execute hostages every 30 minutes until compliance is achieved. Medical personnel are to report to Deck 5 immediately. All others return to your cabins and await further instructions. The PA cut off. Vivian looked at her father, saw her own fear reflected in his eyes. Then she saw something else. Determination. The same expression he wore when explaining to a rig crew that they had to go back into a storm because lives depended on it. We should go to the cabin, Brennan said. You should. I need to get to Deck 5. Viv. You heard him? Medical personnel. That's me. It's also a target. Then I'll be careful. She moved past him toward the stairwell before he could argue. Behind her, Brennan called her name. She didn't turn around. If she looked at him, she might lose her nerve. Might remember that she was a failed surgeon playing at rescue work. Might realize that walking into a hostage situation with terrorists was the kind of decision that got people killed. But people were already dying. And for the first time in 8 months, Vivian Blackwood felt the weight of her oath settling back onto her shoulders like a familiar coat. Deck 5 was chaos. Injured passengers lay on the floor in rough triage groupings. Red tags for critical, yellow for serious, green for walking wounded. Dr. Sullivan moved between them with practiced efficiency, but even from 30 feet away, Vivian could see the doctor's hands shaking. 5 men in tactical gear stood guard. Black masks, no insignia. Weapons held with professional competence. One of them noticed Vivian and raised his rifle. Medical, she said clearly. I'm a doctor. The guard studied her, nodded towards Sullivan. Get to work. Try to run, we shoot. Try to signal for help, we shoot. Try anything except medicine, we shoot. Clear. Clear. Vivian crossed to Sullivan, who looked up with an expression of profound relief mixed with exhaustion. Thank God. But, the older woman breathed, I've got 2 with internal bleeding, 3 head traumas, 1 possible spinal, and I'm out of morphine. Vivian scanned the injured, her mind automatically categorizing, prioritizing, years of training overriding months of fear. The woman with the head trauma needed immediate pressure relief. The man with the compound femur fracture needed stabilization. The elderly passenger with the chest wound needed surgery or he'd die in 20 minutes. Her hands didn't shake. Not anymore. "Where's your surgery suite?" Vivian asked. "Deck 3, but they won't let us." "They will if people die up here. Show me the chest wound." Sullivan led her to an elderly man lying on a makeshift gurney, maybe 70. White hair matted with blood, breathing shallow, lips turning blue. Vivian knelt and unbuttoned his shirt. The wound was small, entry just below the collarbone. But the exit, no exit, internal bleeding, possible cardiac tamponade. He needed a chest tube and he needed it now. "Get me a thoracostomy kit," Vivian said. Sullivan stared. "You're going to tube him here?" "I don't have time to argue with terrorists about operating rooms." "Kit, now." Sullivan scrambled to comply. Vivian pressed her fingers against the man's neck. Pulse weak, thready, jugular veins distended. Classic tamponade. Fluid building in the pericardial sac. Squeezing his heart, killing him with every beat. She'd done this procedure 100 times. Never in a ship corridor, never with armed guards watching. Never after 8 months of self-imposed exile from medicine. Sullivan returned with the kit. Vivian opened it, found the catheter, the scalpel, the chest seal. Her hands moved with muscle memory that defied conscious thought. "Talk to me," she said to the patient. "What's your name?" The man's eyes flickered. "Thomas." "Thomas, I'm Dr. Blackwood. You've got fluid in your chest. I'm going to drain it. You'll feel pressure, maybe some pain, but you're going to be fine. Understand?" A weak nod. Vivian made the incision. Blood welled up. She inserted the catheter, felt it slide between ribs, find the pocket of fluid. When she opened the valve, dark blood poured out. Thomas gasped, coughed. His color immediately improved. "There we go," Vivian murmured. "Easy does it." She secured the tube, applied the seal, checked his vitals. Pulse stronger, breathing easier. He'd live. Behind her, one of the guards lowered his rifle slightly. Vivian moved to the next patient. She worked for 2 hours without stopping. Chest tubes, wound debridement, fracture reduction, emergency sutures. Sullivan assisted with the efficiency of someone who'd spent decades in field medicine. They didn't talk except for necessary medical communication. Every movement was precise, deliberate, professional. Vivian felt something she hadn't felt in 8 months. Certainty. Her hands didn't shake. Her mind didn't second-guess. She made decisions and committed to them and moved to the next patient without the paralysis of self-doubt. It felt like coming home after a long exile, like remembering how to breathe after holding your breath underwater. She was on the 16th patient when the commotion started, shouting from the main corridor. A scuffle. Then a man's voice, angry and afraid. "Get your hands off me. My daughter's on this ship. I need to—" "Brennan." Vivian's head snapped up. She saw her father struggling with the 2 guards who were trying to force him back toward the cabins. His engineer's jacket was torn, blood streaked his temple, and his eyes found hers across the crowded deck with an expression of raw fear. "Viv, they've got hostages on deck 7, 25 people, including—" One of the guards slammed a rifle butt into Brennan's stomach. He doubled over, gasping. The guard raised the weapon again. Vivian was moving before she realized it, crossing the deck, inserting herself between her father and the guard. "Stop," she said, voice calm, hands raised. "He's with me. He's returning to his cabin. He's injured. He needs medical attention." The guard looked at Brennan's bleeding temple, then at Vivian. "You've got 30 seconds. Vivian helped her father to a bench. His breathing was ragged. She checked his pupils. No concussion. The temple wound was superficial, but when she pressed his abdomen where the rifle had struck, he flinched. "Might be bruised ribs," she said quietly. "Can you breathe okay?" "I'm fine, Viv, listen to me." "I'm listening." "They've got VIPs on deck 7, executives, politicians. They're demanding the ship's satellite access. I overheard them talking. This isn't random. They're after someone specific." "Who?" "I don't know, but Viv—" He grabbed her wrist. "One of the guards. I saw his face when his mask slipped. I know him." Vivian went still. "What?" "His name is Reeves, Callahan Reeves. He worked on Nexus 7, the North Slope rig where I did consulting 3 years ago. He was a commercial diver. Good at his job, kept to himself, but Viv, there was an incident. Chemical leak. His family, Brennan's voice dropped. His niece died, 12 years old, leukemia. He blamed the company, said they covered up the contamination. The pieces started fitting together in Vivian's mind. Eco-terrorist group. Target the Arctic Crown during a cruise past offshore drilling operations. Take VIP hostages. Force media attention on corporate malfeasance. This wasn't random violence. This was revenge. Time's up, the guard said. He leaves now. Vivian helped her father stand. Brennan gripped her shoulders. Be careful. Whatever you do, don't become a hero. These men are professionals. They're not going to hesitate. I'm not planning to be a hero. I'm planning to keep people alive. That's the same thing. She managed a small smile. Go. Stay in the cabin. Lock the door. Brennan squeezed her shoulders once more. Then the guards escorted him away. Vivian watched him go, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility settling heavier. Her father, the patients, the hostages on Deck 7, all depending on decisions she made, all at risk if she chose wrong, like Walsh. She pushed the thought away. Returned to the wounded. Sullivan met her eyes with a question that didn't need words. Vivian shook her head slightly. Not now. Later. When they had time to process what was happening and what it meant. She knelt beside a woman with a dislocated shoulder. This is going to hurt, she said, but I'll be quick. The woman nodded through tears. Vivian gripped her arm, felt for the joint, pulled with steady, controlled force. The shoulder popped back into place with an audible click. The woman screamed, and somewhere in the back of Vivian's mind, she heard another scream. Walsh, bleeding out, monitors failing. The moment when she realized her aggressive treatment had triggered the embolism that killed him. But this time, the patient lived. This time, her hands had been steady. This time, she'd chosen right. Vivian moved to the next patient, and the next, and the next. Rebuilding herself one decision at a time, the explosion came at hour 3. Not close. Somewhere deep in the ship. A muffled thump that Vivian felt through the deck more than heard. The lights flickered. The emergency alarms changed pitch, and the guards' radios erupted with rapid chatter. Sullivan looked up sharply. What was that? I don't know. One of the guards pressed his radio. Say again. The response was garbled, but Vivian caught fragments. Deck 7, breach, hostages compromised. Then medical emergency, critical. Now. The guard turned to Vivian. You, come with me. I'm in the middle of, now. Sullivan started to protest. The guard aimed his rifle at her. The old doctor stays. The young one comes. Don't make me repeat myself. Vivian stood slowly, met Sullivan's eyes, saw the fear there. The knowledge that whatever was happening on Deck 7, it was bad enough to pull her away from 40 injured passengers. I'll be back, Vivian said. She didn't know if she was lying. The guard led her through corridors she didn't recognize, down 2 decks, past crew areas, emergency hatches, sealed bulkheads that suggested the ship was compartmentalizing. Standard procedure for hull breaches. But this ship hadn't hit anything. This was deliberate. They reached Deck 7. The guard pushed open a door, gestured her through. The corridor was full of smoke. Not fire smoke, chemical. Vivian smelled it immediately. Tear gas mixed with something else. Something metallic and sharp. The air was thick enough to make her eyes water, her throat close. Through the haze, she saw them. 25 hostages huddled against the far wall. Zip-tied hands, duct-taped mouths, eyes streaming, and lying on the floor in the middle of them, surrounded by spreading blood, was a man in an expensive suit. Vivian didn't need to check his pulse to know he was dying. Fix him, the guard said. She turned to look at the guard, saw past the mask to the eyes beneath. Gray, cold, utterly devoid of mercy. I need supplies. We have supplies. He led her to a side room. Medical bag already prepared. Scalpels, clamps, suture, improvised but functional. Vivian realized with creeping horror that this had been planned. The hostages, the injury, the need for a surgeon. They'd been waiting for her. Who is he? She asked. CEO, Nexus Petroleum, the company that killed my niece. Vivian looked at the guard again, saw past the mask to the grieving uncle beneath. Callahan Reeves, the diver her father had mentioned. The man who'd lost his family to corporate negligence and decided to make them pay. If he dies, Reeves continued, his voice flat, I execute 5 hostages. Then we move to the next VIP and the next, until someone pays attention to what Nexus has been doing in the Arctic. I can't save him if you won't let me work. Then work. He shoved her toward the bleeding CEO. Vivian grabbed the medical bag, knelt in blood that soaked through her pants. The man's eyes were open, conscious, terrified. She lifted his shirt. The wound was bad. Stab wound, deep, angled upward under the rib cage, likely punctured the diaphragm, possibly nicked the liver. He was bleeding internally, and she was being asked to perform surgery in a smoke-filled corridor with improvised tools and no anesthesia, while armed terrorists watched her every move. Vivian's hands started to shake. Not now, she thought. Not now. But she could see Walsh's face, could feel the scalpel slipping, could hear the monitors screaming their failure. I need better light, she said, voice steady through sheer force of will. Reeves gestured. Someone brought an emergency lamp, harsh white light that threw shadows like accusatory fingers. Vivian opened the medical bag, found the scalpel, looked at the CEO's terrified face, thought about Walsh, about Sullivan's arthritic hands, about her father locked in a cabin praying she'd make the right choice, about all the reasons she'd left medicine and all the reasons that suddenly didn't matter. She pressed the scalpel against skin and made the first cut. The CEO's name was Richard Pemberton. Vivian learned this from the monogrammed cufflinks still fastened to his blood-soaked shirt. RJP, Richard James Pemberton, 61 years old according to his driver's license, Executive Vice President of Nexus Petroleum, father of 3, grandfather of 5. Currently bleeding to death while she worked on him with improvised tools in a smoke-filled corridor. The scalpel cut through skin and fascia with practiced precision. Vivian's hands were steady now. The trembling had stopped the moment she made the decision to operate. Like her body remembered what her mind tried to forget, that she was a surgeon, that this was what she'd trained 8 years to do. Retractor, she said. Reeves stood over her shoulder, not helping, just watching, making sure she understood the stakes. Behind him, the hostages huddled against the wall, their zip-tied hands pressed against mouths taped shut. 25 sets of eyes tracking her every movement. I said retractor. One of the other masked guards tossed her a kitchen spatula. Vivian stared at it, then used it anyway, held the wound open, exposed the damage beneath. The blade had gone in under the rib cage, punctured the diaphragm, grazed the liver. Pemberton was lucky. 2 inches higher, and he'd have been dead before she arrived. 2 inches lower, and she wouldn't need to operate at all. As it was, he needed surgery, real surgery, in a sterile operating room with anesthesia and blood transfusions and a team of nurses who knew what they were doing. She had a spatula and a scalpel, and 20 minutes before he bled out. Talk to me, Richard, she said, keeping her voice calm, professional. I need you to stay conscious. Mark Pemberton's eyes were glassy with shock. My family. We'll see you again, but you have to help me. Take slow breaths, in through your nose, out through your mouth. Can you do that? A weak nod. Vivian found the bleeder. Small arterial branch. Nothing critical but enough to kill him if left unchecked. She clamped it, tied it off with suture thread. The blood flow slowed, not stopped, never completely stopped, but manageable. You're doing great, she murmured, to herself as much as to him. The diaphragm tear was next. Through and through laceration, she could see his lung moving underneath, pink and healthy, inflating, deflating, mechanical and miraculous. She'd forgotten how beautiful the human body was when it worked, how perfectly designed, how resilient, how easy it was to destroy. She sutured the diaphragm. Her fingers moved with muscle memory. Over, under, pull tight, tie off, repeat. The same movements she'd made 1,000 times in 1,000 operating rooms. Except now she could hear the guards shifting their weight, could smell the tear gas mixing with blood, could feel Reeves watching her with eyes that promised violence if she failed. Just like Djibouti. Except in Djibouti, the violence had come from her own choices. 23 minutes after she started, Pemberton was stable. His color improved. His breathing steadied. The blood stopped spreading across the floor in accusatory pools. Vivian sat back on her heels, hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. He'll live, she said. Reeves studied Pemberton with an expression she couldn't read. Then he nodded to the guards. Take him to the VIP suite. Keep him under watch. If he crashes, bring her back. 2 guards lifted Pemberton onto a makeshift stretcher. He was unconscious now, shock finally winning, but his vitals were strong. Vivian had bought him time, maybe days, enough for rescue, enough for this nightmare to end, if it ended. Reeves helped Vivian to her feet. His grip was firm, almost gentle. You're good at your job, doctor. I'm a rescue specialist. not a doctor. Rescue specialists don't perform emergency thoracotomies with kitchen utensils. He tilted his head. I know who you are, Vivian Blackwood. I know about Djibouti, about Corporal Walsh, about why you ran away from medicine. Also, Vivian's blood went cold. How? I do my research. When you're planning an operation like this, you learn everything about the assets you might need. The Arctic Crown's passenger manifest listed you, former Navy surgeon, current Coast Guard, perfect candidate for what I needed. You targeted me? I targeted the ship. You were a bonus. Reeves gestured toward the corridor. Walk with me. We need to talk. It wasn't a request. Vivian followed him through smoke and shadows to a cabin that had been converted into a makeshift command center. Laptops on tables, maps on walls, satellite phones and encrypted radios. This wasn't amateur terrorism. This was professional, military grade. Reeves closed the door, removed his mask. The face underneath was weathered, hard angles, gray stubble, eyes that had seen too much and forgiven too little. This was a man who'd spent his life in harsh places doing harsh work. The kind of face you saw on offshore rigs and commercial fishing boats. Competent, dangerous, utterly uncompromising. Sit, he said. Vivian sat. Reeves pulled out a bottle of water, tossed it to her. She caught it automatically. Realized she was desperately thirsty, drank half before she could stop herself. My niece's name was Nora, Reeves said, not sitting, pacing. 12 years old, smart as hell. Wanted to be a marine biologist, study whales, save the ocean. He smiled without humor. She used to collect seashells, had hundreds of them, labeled everything, scientific names, where she found them, what they ate. Vivian waited, knowing this story didn't end well. 3 years ago, she got sick, started with headaches, then nosebleeds. Then she couldn't get out of bed, acute lymphoblastic leukemia. The doctors said it was aggressive, unusual for her age. They ran tests, found heavy metals in her blood. Benzene, toluene. Compounds that shouldn't be in a 12-year-old girl. Reeves stopped pacing, looked at Vivian directly. I was working on Nexus 7 at the time, North Slope drilling platform. We had a leak, small, contained. Management said it was handled, but it wasn't. For 18 months, that platform dumped contaminated water into the Sound, into the fishing grounds where my sister's family lived, where Nora played on the beach and collected her shells and breathed air that was slowly killing her. Vivian's throat tightened. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't bring her back. Sorry doesn't make Nexus pay for what they did. They covered it up, bought off the inspectors, threatened anyone who talked. My sister tried to sue. They buried her in legal fees until she went bankrupt. Nora died 6 months ago. Never saw her 13th birthday. The pain in his voice was real, raw, the kind of grief that didn't heal, that turned into rage and festered until it found an outlet. So you hijacked a cruise ship, Vivian said quietly. I'm making them pay attention. Pemberton was on the board when they decided to cover up the leak. He signed off on the hush money, on the falsified reports, on letting children die to protect shareholder value. Reeves leaned against the table. Tomorrow morning, Nexus's stock tanks. The media reports on the hijacking, on the CEO held hostage, on why. And maybe, just maybe, one little girl's death means something. Vivian understood the logic, understood the pain driving it, but understanding didn't make it right. What about the 380 passengers who have nothing to do with Nexus, she asked. Collateral damage, same as Nora. That's not justice, that's revenge. You say that like there's a difference. Before Vivian could respond, Reeves's radio crackled. A voice spoke rapidly. Urgent. Reeves's expression changed. He grabbed his mask, headed for the door. Stay here, he ordered. What's happening? Your father just did something very stupid. Vivian's heart stopped. She was on her feet following Reeves into the corridor before he could stop her. He grabbed her arm. She yanked free. That's my father. If something happened, he broke into the engine room, tried to sabotage the power systems. My men caught him. He's injured. The world tilted. How badly? Bad enough. Come on. They ran through the ship, down 3 decks, past crew quarters and storage compartments. The engine room was a cathedral of steel and noise, massive turbines, pipes thick as tree trunks. And lying on the deck near the main generator, surrounded by guards, was Brennan Blackwood. Blood pooled beneath him. Vivian dropped to her knees beside her father. His face was pale, his breathing shallow, and pressed against his abdomen, trying to staunch the bleeding were his own hands, shaking. Dad, look at me. Brennan's eyes focused. Viv, I'm sorry. Tried to cut the power. Thought if the ship went dark. Don't talk. Save your strength. She lifted his hands away, saw the wound beneath. Stab wound. Deep. In almost the exact same place as Pemberton's. But worse. The blade had gone through muscle and fascia and into the peritoneal cavity. Internal bleeding, possibly bowel perforation. He needed surgery immediately, and he needed blood. Get me supplies, Vivian ordered. Now, Reeves gestured. Guards brought a medical kit, better than what she'd had with Pemberton. Actual retractors, real clamps, proper suture. But no blood, no plasma. No way to replace what Brennan was losing with every heartbeat. She worked anyway. Opened the wound, found the bleeder, clamped it. Her hands were steady, her mind clear. But she could feel time slipping away, could see her father's color fading, could hear his breathing becoming labored. I need blood, she said. What's his type? Reeves checked a chart. A B negative. The rarest blood type, less than 1% of the population. Vivian's hands paused. She looked up at Reeves. What's your type? A B negative. Of course it was. The universe had a sick sense of humor. You're the only compatible donor on this ship, Vivian said. I need your blood to save him. Reeves's expression didn't change. No. He'll die without a transfusion. That's not my problem. You want Nexus to pay attention. Let the CEO's savior's father die because you wouldn't donate blood. See how that plays in the media. It was a calculated appeal. Manipulative. But Vivian was past caring about ethics. This was her father. The man who'd raised her alone after her mother died. Who'd sat through every piano recital and science fair. Who'd never once told her she couldn't be whatever she wanted. He was dying on a ship engine room floor, and she would do anything to save him. Reeves considered, then winced, pressed his hand against his side. Are you hurt? Vivian asked. Acute pancreatitis. Had it for 2 days. Been managing with pills. He grimaced. Getting worse. Let me see. I'm fine. You're not fine. Acute pancreatitis can kill you. Let me examine you. Reeves hesitated, then lifted his shirt. Vivian saw the inflammation immediately. Swollen abdomen. Tenderness. Classic signs of pancreatic inflammation. Probably brought on by stress and poor diet. Left untreated, it would progress to necrotizing pancreatitis. Sepsis. Death. An idea formed. A terrible, necessary idea. I'll make you a deal, Vivian said. I treat your pancreatitis. Proper treatment, IV fluids, pain management, antibiotics. In exchange, you donate blood for my father. I don't make deals. Then we both watch people die. Your choice. Reeves stared at her, weighing options, calculating risks. Finally, he nodded. Fine, but if you're lying, I'm a doctor. I don't lie about medical conditions. She almost believed it herself. The procedure took 40 minutes. Vivian set up a makeshift transfusion system using the medical supplies available. Drew blood from Reeves, filtered it, transfused it into Brennan. Meanwhile, she started Reeves on IV fluids for the pancreatitis, gave him morphine for the pain, explained what he needed to do to avoid complications. Reeves sat through it all with stoic silence, watching her work, watching the blood flow from his arm into her father's. When it was done, he stood, tested his balance. You're good, and he said, I'll give you that. Rest. The pancreatitis will get worse before it gets better. I don't have time to rest. He left. Guards followed. Vivian was alone with her father, who was breathing easier now, color returning. The transfusion working? She held his hand and felt tears she couldn't afford pressing against her eyes. You're going to be okay, she whispered. I've got you. Brennan squeezed her hand weakly. I know. Commander Garrett Winters found her 20 minutes later. He appeared in the engine room doorway like a ghost, still in civilian clothes but carrying himself like he'd never left the Navy. Behind him, 2 of Reeves's guards stood watch, not threatening, just present. Dr. Winters said, we need to talk. Vivian looked up from checking her father's IV. I'm busy. I know, but this can't wait. Something in his tone made her pause. She stood, followed him to a corner where the guards couldn't hear. Winters pulled out a satellite phone. I've been in contact with the Coast Guard, he said quietly. They're preparing a tactical team, but Reeves has explosives rigged throughout the ship. If they breach, he'll detonate, kill everyone. So we're trapped. For now, but I have an idea. Winters glanced at the guards. I need you to do something. Something dangerous. What? Get me access to Reeves's medical records. The real ones. I need to know if what he told you about his niece is true. Vivian frowned. Why would he lie? Because I served with a Callahan Reeves in Naval Special Warfare. SEAL Team 3. He was a combat medic, expert in demolitions. Disappeared after his discharge 6 years ago. Last known employment was private military contracting in Syria. The words settled like ice water in Vivian's stomach. You think he's lying about Nora? I think professional soldiers don't hijack cruise ships over dead relatives. They do it for money. Someone hired him. I need to know who. Vivian looked at her unconscious father, at the guards watching them, at the ship tilting 15 degrees because ice held it like a frozen fist. How am I supposed to get his medical records? You're treating his pancreatitis. You'll need to monitor him, run tests, access his personal information. Winters' eyes were steady. You're a doctor. He'll trust you. You want me to spy on him? I want you to find out the truth. Before Vivian could respond, the explosion happened. Not close. Somewhere above them. Deck 9, maybe Deck 10. The blast shook the ship hard enough to knock Vivian off balance. Winters caught her, held her steady as the emergency alarm screamed and the lights flickered. Then screaming, real screaming, people in pain. Reeves's voice came over the ship's PA system. Calm, cold. That was a demonstration. The next explosion will be in a passenger area. You have 45 minutes to deliver the satellite uplink codes to Deck 7, or 8 hostages die. Winters met Vivian's eyes. 45 minutes. Can you do this? Vivian thought about Walsh, about making the wrong choice and living with the consequences, about all the reasons she'd left medicine and all the reasons that suddenly seemed like cowardice. I'll try. She returned to treating her father, but her mind was racing, planning, trying to figure out how to get close enough to Reeves to access information he wouldn't willingly give. The answer came from an unexpected source. 30 minutes after the explosion, one of Reeves's guards appeared in the engine room. Young, maybe 26, blonde hair, cold eyes. He moved with the nervous energy of someone tweaking on adrenaline or something stronger. "You're Dr. Blackwood," he said. "Yes. Callahan wants you now." Vivian followed him through corridors lit by emergency lights, up 2 decks, past sealed bulkheads and huddled passengers. The guard didn't speak, just led her to the command center where Reeves sat at a laptop face pale, pressing his hand against his side. The pancreatitis was worse. "You lied," Reeves said without preamble. Vivian's heart hammered. "About what?" "The treatment. I'm getting worse, not better. Acute pancreatitis takes time. The inflammation has to resolve. I told you it would get worse before. I don't have time." He stood, swayed. The guard caught him. "I need you to operate. Remove the damaged tissue, whatever it takes." "That's not how pancreatitis works. Surgery makes it worse. You need rest. Fluids. Time." "I don't have time." He slammed his fist on the table. Winced. Nearly collapsed. Vivian moved on instinct. Caught him. Helped him to a chair. Checked his pulse. Racing. His skin was hot. Fever. The pancreatitis was progressing to systemic infection. He was dying. And if he died, the young guard with the cold eyes would take over. The one who looked at hostages like they were target practice. "I need to examine you properly," Vivian said. "Full workup, blood tests, imaging, if possible." "Fine, do it." She worked quickly. Drew blood, palpated his abdomen, asked questions about symptoms and duration and pain levels. While she worked, she noticed things. The laptop opened to encrypted files, the maps showing the ship's layout with specific points marked, the satellite phone on the table with a recent call log. And in the corner, half hidden under papers, a file folder labeled Blackwood Vivian. Her blood went cold. "How long have you been watching me?" she asked quietly. Reeves followed her gaze to the folder, smiled without humor. "Since you boarded, I told you I do my research." "What's in the file?" "Everything, your service record, your surgical history, Djibouti, Corporal Walsh, the lawsuit, the hearing you ran from." He leaned back. "You made an aggressive choice, went for the high-risk, high-reward option. And the patient died. Classic surgical hubris." Vivian's hand stilled. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I? I've seen it 100 times. Young doctors thinking they're invincible, choosing glory over caution, killing patients in the name of innovation." His eyes were cold. "Walsh had a 68% chance with conservative treatment. You chose the procedure with 82%, but you didn't account for the 1 in 5,000 complication. And he died because of it. The board cleared me. Did they, or did you run before they could rule?" Vivian's throat closed. because he was right. She'd left 2 days before the final hearing. Couldn't stand to hear them say what she already knew. That she'd killed Walsh through arrogance, through believing she was skilled enough to beat the odds. The hearing cleared you, Reeves continued. Full exoneration. The embolism was unpredictable. You followed protocol, did everything right, but you never went back to check. Just assumed you were guilty and ran. The words hit like physical blows. How do you know that? Because I have the full transcript. He gestured to the folder. Read it yourself. Vivian reached for the folder with shaking hands. Opened it, found pages of medical testimony. Expert witnesses. The final ruling. Dr. Vivian Blackwood acted within accepted standards of care. The patient's death resulted from an unforeseeable complication. No negligence found. No disciplinary action recommended. She'd been innocent. For 8 months, she'd carried guilt that wasn't hers. For 8 months, she'd run from a crime she didn't commit. The folder slipped from her hands. Reeves watched her with something that might have been pity, or contempt, or both. You destroyed your career over nothing, he said. At least when I destroy things, I have a reason. Before Vivian could respond, the young guard burst in. Callahan, we have a problem. What? The Coast Guard refused the satellite codes. They're sending a tactical team, ETA, 20 minutes. Reeves stood, swayed, grabbed the table for balance. Activate the charges, all of them. All of them? That'll breach the hull in 6 places. The ship will sink in. I don't care. If they breach, we detonate. Everyone dies. The guard's eyes gleamed. Finally, I've been waiting to... Silas. The guard stopped, looked at Reeves with an expression Vivian couldn't read. I give the orders, Reeves said quietly. Not you. Remember that. Silas smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Of course, Callahan, whatever you say. He left. Vivian helped Reeves back to the chair. His fever was spiking, the infection spreading. Without aggressive treatment, he had maybe 6 hours. You need antibiotics, she said. Strong ones, and surgical debridement of the necrotic tissue. Then do it. Not here in the ship's medical bay, with proper equipment. No, here now. Callahan, I don't trust you. You'll sabotage it. Let me die. Save everyone. He was right. The thought had crossed her mind. Let him die. Let Silas take over and make a mistake. Give the Coast Guard an opening. But looking at him now, feverish, dying, still trying to hold on to control, she saw something else. A man who'd lost everything and decided to make the world hurt as much as he did. Like her after Walsh. I won't sabotage it, she said quietly, but I need the truth. Is Nora real? Reeves's expression shifted. For just a moment, the cold competence cracked, revealed something raw underneath. Yes. Did she die from Nexus contamination? Hesitation. Then no. The truth settled between them like a confession. She was real, Reeves continued. My sister's daughter, 12 years old, beautiful, smart, but she didn't die from leukemia. She died from a car accident. Drunk driver. 3 years ago. Vivian stared. Then why? Because I needed a story, something sympathetic, something that would make people pay attention. He laughed bitterly. I'm not an eco-terrorist. I'm a contractor, hired by the private equity firm to tank Nexus's stock value so they can acquire the company cheap. The hijacking, the hostages, the demands. All theater. You're killing people for money. I'm taking money to facilitate change. There's a difference. No, there really isn't. An alarm blared. Different pitch, more urgent. Reeves grabbed his radio. Report. Silas's voice crackled back. The charges at the bow just detonated. We didn't activate them. Someone else did. What? It's flooding. Deck 2 is already underwater. We've got maybe 30 minutes before the ship capsizes. Reeves looked at Vivian. For the first time, she saw fear in his eyes. You need to operate, he said. Now, before the ship sinks, or we all die down here. Vivian thought about her father, about the 380 passengers, about Winters and his plan, and the truth about Reeves that changed everything. Then she thought about Walsh, about the choice she'd made, about 82% versus 68%, about being a doctor even when it meant saving the wrong person. Lie down, she said. This is going to hurt. She began to operate while the ship groaned and tilted and water rushed through breaches below. Scalpel in hand, steady despite everything. Because this was what she did. This was who she was. A surgeon, even when the world was ending. The ship listed 22 degrees. Vivian felt it in her bones, in the way the surgical instruments slid across the makeshift table. in the way blood pooled to one side of Callahan Reeves's abdomen instead of spreading evenly, in the way gravity itself seemed wrong, pulling everything toward the starboard side where water was flooding through breaches she couldn't see but could hear. The groaning, the rushing, the sound of a ship dying. She'd debrided the necrotic tissue from Reeves's pancreas, drained the infected fluid, packed the wound with gauze soaked in antibiotics. It wasn't elegant surgery. It wasn't the kind of procedure that would earn praise in a medical journal, but it would keep him alive. For now. How much longer? Reeves asked through gritted teeth. No anesthesia, just morphine. Enough to dull the pain, but not enough to cloud his judgment. He'd insisted, said he needed to stay alert, to maintain control. 5 minutes, Vivian said. If you stop talking. The ship doesn't have 5 minutes. He was right. The list was increasing. 23 degrees now. Soon it would reach the tipping point, the angle where physics took over and the Arctic crown rolled completely, trapped everyone inside a steel coffin filled with freezing water. Vivian worked faster, sutured the peritoneum, closed the fascia. Her fingers moved with precision born from 8 years of training and 8 months of trying to forget. Done, she said. Reeves sat up slowly, tested his abdomen, winced but nodded. Good work, doctor. Before Vivian could respond, the explosion happened. Not close, somewhere above them. Deck 9. The blast shook the ship hard enough to knock surgical instruments off the table. Emergency alarms screamed, and Reeves's radio erupted with panicked voices. Report, Reeves commanded. Static. Then Silas's voice sharp with fury. Someone's detonating our charges. The bow section just blew. I didn't trigger it. Reeves's face went white. Where's the master detonator? Missing. Someone took it from the command center. Vivian's mind raced. Winters. It had to be. He'd found the detonator, was using it to force evacuation, to create controlled breaches, even if it meant sinking the ship. Smart, ruthless. The kind of decision that saved hundreds, but killed the possibility of perfect outcomes. The kind of decision she'd made with Walsh. Lock down all remaining charges, Reeves ordered. I'm coming up. He stood, swayed, grabbed the table for balance. The surgery had stabilized him, but he was still weak, still fevered, still a man held together by sutures and willpower. You need to rest, Vivian said. I need to stop Winters from sinking this ship with everyone on it. He moved toward his door, paused. Your father's in the engine room, under guard. If the bow section floods, that compartment goes next. Get him out. Then he was gone. Vivian ran. She found Commander Garrett Winters in a stairwell between deck 6 and 7, hunched over a control panel with wires exposed. The detonator. He looked up when she appeared. No surprise in his eyes, just grim acknowledgement. Doctor. Commander. She nodded at the device. You're sinking the ship. I'm creating evacuation corridors. The Arctic crown is lost, has been since the glacier hit, but I can control how it goes down. Give people time to reach the lifeboats. He connected 2 wires, another explosion, deck 3. The ship lurched. Reeves rigged these charges with a dead man's switch, but if I trigger them manually in sequence, I can breach the hull in controlled locations. What about the people still trapped below? Working on that. He connected another wire. The hostages on deck 7 are being moved to evacuation points. Your father is in the engine room. I know. I'm going to get him. Vivian heard voices below, guards running, Silas shouting. They'd figured out where Winters was. Go, Winters said. I'll hold them here as long as I can. She went. The engine room was flooding. Water poured through cracks in the hull, through seams that had split when the glacier crushed the ship. It was waist-deep and rising, cold enough to steal breath. Brennan Blackwood sat propped against the main turbine, hands still zip-tied behind his back. The guard who'd been watching him was gone. Fled. Vivian cut her father's restraints with a piece of broken metal. Can you walk? She asked. Brennan tested his legs. I can try. His color was better. The transfusion from Reeves had worked, but he was still weak, still recovering from emergency surgery. He wouldn't last long if the flooding got worse. They made it to the stairs before the world exploded. The blast came from directly below. Deck 2, the bow charges that Winters hadn't disabled. Someone else had triggered them. Not Winters, not Reeves. Silas. The explosion tore through the hull like a giant's fist. Water surged upward in a wall of freezing fury. Vivian grabbed her father, pulled him against the stairwell wall, felt the ship roll hard to port. 30 degrees, 35, 40. When the water receded, Brennan was lying at the bottom of the stairs, not moving. Dad. Vivian scrambled down, turned him over, saw blood spreading across his abdomen. The surgical site had torn. The force of the blast had ripped the sutures. Internal bleeding. Worse than before. His eyes fluttered open. Viv, don't talk. I've got you. She dragged him up the stairs. One deck. Two. The water followed them. The ship tilted further, 45 degrees. Walking was climbing. Gravity pulled sideways. They reached deck 5. The medical bay where Dr. Catherine Sullivan was still treating patients. Still working, despite the chaos. The 63-year-old surgeon looked up when Vivian appeared carrying her father. We need to operate, Vivian said. Now. Sullivan looked at Brennan's abdomen, at the blood, at the ship tilting around them. We don't have time. The ship's capsizing. Then we work fast. They laid Brennan on a gurney. Vivian cut away his shirt, exposed the wound. The internal bleeding was catastrophic. Without immediate surgery, he had minutes, maybe less. She'd done this before. In Djibouti, with Walsh, made the aggressive choice, gone for the high percentage outcome, and watched her patient die anyway. What do you need? Sullivan asked. Retractors, clamps, suture, and someone to keep him alive while I work. Sullivan's arthritic hands trembled as she prepared supplies. But her voice was steady. I've got him. Vivian made the first incision. She was 3 minutes into the surgery when Winters appeared in the doorway. Dr. Blackwood. His voice was urgent. I need you. I'm in the middle of the final charges. I can't disarm them. The wiring's been compromised. Someone needs to cut the connections manually, from inside the bow compartment. Vivian's hands paused over her father's abdomen. How long? 5 minutes, maybe less. If those charges detonate, the bow section separates completely. Everyone in the forward lifeboats dies. 200 people. She looked at her father, at the bleeder she'd just clamped, at the repair half finished, at the choice. Save Brennan. Let 200 people die. Or abandon him. Save the masses. Watch him bleed out alone. The same choice she'd made with Walsh. Aggressive approach or conservative. High risk or low. 82% or 68. Except this time the numbers were starker. 1 versus 200. Her hands began to shake. Viv. Brennan's voice was weak. Go. Dad, I'm 65 years old. I've lived. Those people? He coughed, blood on his lips. Go. Sullivan met her eyes. I can't finish this. I'm not skilled enough. If you leave, he dies. Vivian looked at her father, at the man who'd raised her alone after her mother died, who'd never missed a school play or piano recital, who'd supported her through medical school and held her while she cried after Walsh, who'd flown to Seattle the day she quit surgery just to sit with her in silence, the man who'd never given up on her. She looked at Winters, at the commander who represented duty, sacrifice, the greater good. Then she looked at her hands, still shaking, still remembering Walsh, still afraid of making the wrong choice. No, she said. Winters stared. What? No, I'm not leaving him. Not this time. Find another way. There is no other way. Then improvise. That's what we do. She returned to the surgery, found the bleeder, clamped it. I chose the mission once, chose the numbers over the person, and I've spent 8 months hating myself for it. I'm done choosing numbers. 200 people will die. Then someone else saves them. I'm saving my father. Winters looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded, started to leave. Wait, Reeves's voice came from the corridor. He leaned against this door frame, pale bleeding through his bandages. I'll go. Everyone turned. You just had surgery, Vivian said. You can barely stand. I can stand long enough. Reeves met her eyes. You saved my life when you didn't have to. When I was your enemy. When letting me die would have ended this. He smiled without humor. Let me return the favor. Callahan, I'm a dead man anyway, doctor. Necrotizing pancreatitis. Sepsis. Even with your surgery, I've got days at best. Let me make them count. He pushed off from the doorframe, swayed but stayed upright. Where's the bow compartment? He asked Winters. Winters studied him, then gestured. This way. They left together. Vivian returned to her father, to the surgery, to the choice she'd made. Sullivan worked beside her, arthritic hands moving with practiced efficiency despite the ship tilting, despite the water rising, despite everything. You did the right thing, Sullivan said quietly. Did I? 200 people are being saved by someone else. You can't save everyone, Vivian. Sometimes you have to choose who you can live without losing. Vivian found the torn artery, repaired it. The bleeding slowed. 4 minutes later, Brennan's vitals stabilized. 5 minutes later, the ship shuddered. Not from an explosion, from the absence of one. The bow charges had been disarmed. Reeves had done it. "We need to evacuate," Sullivan said. "This ship has 10 minutes. Maybe less." They moved Brennan to a gurney, started wheeling him toward the upper decks, toward the lifeboats. Other medical staff joined them, patients on stretchers, walking wounded supporting each other. Vivian saw Winters in a corridor. He was helping passengers. His face was grim. "Reeves," she asked, "cut the charges. Save the forward boats." Winters paused. "Silas shot him before I could get there." Vivian's chest tightened. "Where is he?" "Deck 7 with the hostages. He's dying." She looked at her father, at Sullivan, at the patients depending on them, at another choice. "Go," Brennan said. "I'm stable. Catherine can get me to the boats." "Dad, he saved my life. Our lives. Go." Vivian ran. She found Reeves on deck 7. He was lying among the freed hostages, hand pressed against his abdomen. Blood seeped between his fingers. Silas's body lay 10 feet away. Single gunshot wound to the head. Reeves had shot him, then collapsed. Vivian knelt, examined the wound. Silas had shot him in the same place she'd operated. The surgical site was destroyed. Internal bleeding, sepsis from the ruptured pancreas. He was dying. She could try to save him, could open him up right here, could attempt another emergency surgery, could fail, like Walsh, or she could let him go, could hold his hand, could give him peace instead of pain. "Don't," Reeves said, reading her expression. "Don't try to save me. I'm a doctor. It's what I do. You're a surgeon who knows when the patient is past saving." He coughed, blood on his lips. "Nora, my niece, she was real. I didn't lie about that." "I know. But she didn't die from cancer. Car accident. 3 years ago. Drunk driver." His eyes were distant. "I've been trying to make her death mean something. Thought if I could expose Nexus, punish them, it would justify losing her. Make it hurt less." "Man, did it?" "No, it just hurt more people." He smiled sadly. "You were right. Deaths don't mean anything unless we learn from them." "I learned too late." Vivian held his hand. "What would you have learned?" "That revenge doesn't bring anyone back. That the only thing that matters is what you do with the time you have left." He squeezed her hand weakly. "Walsh didn't die because you made the wrong choice, Vivian. He died because bodies fail, because medicine has limits, because we're all human. How did you— I read your file, all of it, including the parts you ran from." His breathing was labored. "You were cleared, exonerated, but you never forgave yourself. Same as me, we're both carrying ghosts we don't deserve." The ship groaned, tilted further. 50 degrees. The tipping point was close. "You need to go," Reeves said. "Get to the lifeboats." "Not without you." "I'm already gone, Doctor. Have been for 3 years. Ever since Nora died and I decided revenge mattered more than redemption." He coughed again, harder. "Don't make my mistake. Don't waste years hating yourself. Forgive yourself. Move forward. Be the surgeon you were meant to be." His eyes closed, his breathing slowed. Vivian checked for a pulse. Faint, irregular. He had minutes. She could leave him, could save herself, could reach the lifeboats and live. Or she could stay, could hold his hand, could give him the dignity of dying with someone who cared. She stayed. 2 minutes later, Callahan Reeves took his last breath. His hand went slack in hers. And Vivian Blackwood, who'd spent 8 months running from death, finally learned how to sit with it. How to accept that sometimes people die. That sometimes there's nothing you can do. That being a doctor means bearing witness to loss without letting it destroy you. She closed his eyes, whispered a prayer she didn't quite believe in. Then she ran for the lifeboats. The Arctic Crown capsized at 53 degrees, slipped beneath the water like a sound, like an ending, like the close of a chapter that had cost too much and taught more. Vivian watched from the lifeboat, her father beside her, Sullivan on her other side. Counted the boats. 19. Full of passengers, crew, hostages. Not everyone had made it. 17 souls lost to the ocean, including Reeves, including 3 crew members who'd stayed behind to help others evacuate. But 363 survived because of Winters' controlled detonations, because of Reeves' final sacrifice, because of choices made in impossible moments. "You did good," Brennan said quietly. Vivian eyed looked at him, at the bandages on his abdomen, at the father she'd chosen over 200 strangers. "I don't know if I did," she said. "I chose you over You chose to be human, to love someone. That's not a failing, Viv. That's what makes you a good doctor. You remember that we're all people, not just numbers. Coast Guard cutters arrived 30 minutes later. Helicopters, rescue teams. They pulled everyone from the lifeboats, triaged the injured, searched for survivors in the water. They found 3 more, including a crew member who'd been clinging to debris for 40 minutes. They didn't find Commander Garrett Winters. The last anyone saw him, he was in the bow section, triggering the final sequence, making sure everyone else had time to evacuate. He'd made his choice too. 4 months later, Vivian stood in the Seattle Naval Hospital's surgical wing, reading the letter that had arrived that morning. Dr. Vivian Blackwood is hereby cleared of all charges related to the death of Corporal Ethan Walsh. The board finds no evidence of negligence or deviation from accepted standards of care. Recommendation: Dr. Blackwood should return to active surgical duty. She'd been innocent all along. The door opened. Captain Morrison entered. Dr. Blackwood, ready for rounds? She folded the letter, put it in her pocket. Yes, sir. They walked through the ward together, past recovery rooms, past the surgical theater, past all the places where lives hung in balance and doctors made impossible choices. Your first surgery is scheduled for 0900, Morrison said. Cardiac procedure, high risk. What are the odds? Conservative approach, 74%. Aggressive approach, 89%. The numbers settled in her chest, different from Walsh, but the same choice, high risk or low, perfection or a caution. She thought about Reeves, about his final words, about forgiveness and moving forward, about being human. I'll review the file, she said. Make the call based on what the patient needs, not what the numbers say. Morrison nodded approval. That's good medicine, doctor. She scrubbed in 20 minutes later. The patient's name was Christina Torres, 43, mother of 2. Her heart was failing. Vivian reviewed the options, considered the risks, made her choice. Not because it was perfect, because it was right. The surgery lasted 4 hours. Christina Torres survived, and when Vivian left the operating room, she felt something she hadn't felt in 8 months. Peace. Not because she'd succeeded, because she'd tried. Because she'd made a choice and lived with it. Because she'd finally learned what Winters had tried to tell her on the Arctic Crown's observation deck. That perfect surgeons don't exist. Only surgeons who keep trying after they fail. She was one of them now, and she always would be.